Thank you for watching the art edition of Dallas Black Film Festival Institute presents Soul Talk, where we have intimate conversations with creatives about film, art, poetry, and music. I'm your host, Lauren Cross, director of the Den Black Film Festival's Institute, art director of the Institute. A special thank you to our sponsor, NBC5 DFW. And I am here to introduce a phenomenal artist in the Dallas Fort Worth area, Ciara Elle Bryant, who will be joining us today for Soul Talk. So I just want to give you a little bit of information about her and we'll get started. So Ciara Elle Bryant is a multidisciplinary artist using photography, video, installation to explore Black culture in the new millennium. Her art and curatorial practices center around documenting and preserving the Black experience. Her recent solo exhibitions at Road to Art Gallery in Dallas and the National Sculpture Center, as well as Ex Ovo Sweet Pass Sculpture Park, feature an ongoing installation project that she calls Server. And Server is an installation of Bryant's data archive featuring imagery and audio familiar to her personal Black experience. She received her MFA from the Southern Methodist University in 2020 after graduating with a BA in Art and Performance from the University of Texas at Dallas in 2016. And I just want to welcome Ciara to Soul Talk.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. It's such a pleasure to sit and talk with you
Of course,
about just your whole world of art and also just you as a human. So I love to just kind of, and you can hear my dog in the background, unfortunately. I love to just kind of start out by just letting our viewing audience get to know you a little bit. So tell us where you're from and, just a little bit about your background.
Okay, I am from Miami. I grew up in Miami, Florida. I came here in 2004 was the first time we moved here. And I've been in Dallas on and off for those last 15-ish years. I go home a lot. I spend a lot of time in Miami and experiencing all that is my background and my ancestry. Because mostly all my family is still there. So I get to go home and spend time with them. But then here I started building my own little circle of friend family. So that's also really important to me too. I lived in Oak Cliff most of my time here in Dallas. So I got to build a really strong community out there and like spend a lot of time with people that have influenced that neighborhood for years beyond me. But I've built that little community here and I always want to preserve it because that's where our home is and I love to spend time there. But since I've been back in Dallas, I've been making art and it's been fun, but also super challenging because of, climate and where to show, how to show, who is going to show your work. So it's been interesting for the last 10 years making art here.
So let's explore that a little bit. Like, you're like, are you sure?
Yeah.
So what is it like making art in this area?
It's okay. So it's like I'm making the things that I want to make, how I want to make them, and I know there are people that resonate with this work. However, for a while, I was not getting any opportunities to show said work, or the only opportunities I would get were, calls that I had to apply for or stuff with the universities I was at. So that was a little tough. But then also, like, some of my professors or some of the people that were like on my committees would tell me, oh, I probably should censor myself, or nobody's going to understand this because this is very like specific. So those are the conversations that came up in my educational advancements in art. And that kind of hurt as well. But I got this one opportunity that changed my life.
Okay.
And it was the show at South Dallas Cultural Center. It was a solo show at South Dallas Cultural Center. And ever since then, I understood I had an audience that actually cared and wanted to see me my process and me grow. And then I also had the support from like John Spriggers and Vicky Meek, who basically gave me some of the tools to like maneuver through other realms of art. Um, and that really just changed everything. It has still been a little difficult, you know, getting bigger galleries and bigger institutions to support my work and give me opportunities, but um, it it's been a give and take kind of situation and more of them taking. But think I finally found my footing here and I'm starting to thrive a little bit more.
Yes. I love how you mentioned South Dallas Culture Center because I
Yeah.
think for a lot of Black artists
Yep.
in this area, that
Hmm.
is such a launch pad for
Yep.
many of us. I feel like I had a similar experience after having my first solo show there, that it seemed like something happened after that, you know,
Hmm.
because I was given a lot of freedom to just do whatever I wanted to do. And as
Yeah.
you said, there was a whole audience that understood the conversation. So
Yep.
kind of like to your point about, how the feedback you might get in school that, you may have faculty members that have no prior understanding or knowledge about Black culture. So some of that is like, like that's kind of
Yeah.
where it's coming from. Like, well, that's so niche or so specific, and it's like
Yeah.
actually like if you put this in a certain environment, it's actually
It's,
more common of a
yep.
conversation.
Yeah. I think South Dallas having that opportunity and that freedom, because there's a lot of freedom. Like I remember going in, and this is before John Spriggins was the director. So Harold was still there. So
Yeah.
I remember going in and Harold being like, do whatever you want. Like you have all of the space
Hmm.
besides this one chunk that is going to be something else, but you have all of the space and do what you want to do. And like that was my first opportunity having that freedom, but also like I didn't have anybody second guessing what I was doing. They
Mm.
brought me in because they wanted to see it. They
Yep.
wanted it to be hung on the wall. And that kind of like spoiled me because like now I'm just like, oh, I can't do what I want to do. Like, I don't want to do this. Or I
Hmm.
have to be in certain parameters. Like, why? Why do I have to be in these parameters?
Right.
So that really like made me feel really good, but also like spoiled me because now my demands are a little bit more higher because I had that experience as my first experience. But definitely love it. Definitely see it helping and advancing a lot of artists here. Right now, I think since since Vibrant Thing happened last year, I think two of my artists that I had in that curated show have already shown
Hmm.
in South Dallas, and there are others that are coming up.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So let's talk about Vibrant Thing. So that was like was that your first curatorial debut or
It was not, but it was the first one that had that much behind it.
kind of like
Um,
pow
yeah, it
effect?
had a lot of press, it had a lot of talking, it had a lot of other other things go on. But
Yes.
no, it was not my first. It was my second.
Okay.
Second. But this one just changed the game because of the timing and what was going on. So I had called in a favor to a friend who is Ashley Witt, who is the president of 500X, and They had just moved to this new location.
Mhm.
They were experiencing like their own backlash from certain art communities. So it was like, okay, we're in the limbo too. So during the uprising, and I call it the uprising because it's basically us fighting for our freedom and our rights,
No, it's
and
exactly what
everybody,
Yep.
everybody watching us do it
Yeah.
last summer. I had called out a bunch of institutions for not supporting Black artists and not supporting, you know, Black curators and people of color. And said, I made a personal attempt to reach out to the people I knew that had these spaces and, say, hey, this is what we were talking about.
Right.
And with Ashley, I just sent a text message and said, I want to curate a show. And within 2 hours, she replied and she was like, yes, I'll talk to the members. When do you want to do it? We had already planned on a date before I had found out I got to do National Windows.
Mm,
So between National Windows and announcing that I was having this curatorial exhibition, um, it just blew up. Like this Black person is doing this Black thing with all these Black artists. And
right.
this is the first time in Dallas, which it wasn't really the first time, but it was the
Right.
first time that it was at 500X,
500X.
which
Yeah.
with a member run gallery that had these people that are working artists in Dallas that either have gone to institutions or have shown at like the Nasher or have worked with, Tally Dunn or has worked with the Fort Worth Modern. So these were artists that were here,
Hmm.
younger contemporary artists that were here making that either haven't had a show, haven't been in the show in a while, or they weren't getting the same amount of press. But I knew them because they were my friends, and I was like, "Hey, you want to do this thing?" And
Right.
they all said yes, and it turned into a huge situation, which I didn't think it was a huge situation. I just
It
thought
was.
I thought I was just doing something for like my people. I was like, let me just put my friends in a show and call it this thing because I love this song and this song inspires me so much. And it turned into a launching pad for not only myself but all the artists that
Yeah.
I worked with. Gave more galleries chances to see them and understand their work, and I had a lot of commentary around their work and
Hmm.
putting them in certain arenas that they were never in before.
Yeah.
And now all of them are doing amazing.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's there are few artists that like try to do the whole artist and curator thing,
yeah.
and I understand that very personally. um and so I really would love to kind of get your thoughts about like just the interchange of those
I
two things.
think I think I narrowed it down because I thought about this the other day too. I think it's because we teach and we have to
Mm,
look at work a lot that we
mhm.
understand how to guide people through this. Oh, I like this idea that you're going through, and I want to see it blossom. That's the
Right.
same thing when you have studio visits with artists, and you're like, I want to put you in the show, but can you give me this, and can you build on that? Or I want to bring this work with this other person's work because I see the correlation, or I see the conversation in medium, or the conversation in theory.
Right.
So it's because we have to do that in our paid job, and I say paid
Mm,
job because that's a job that pays our bills. That we just easily can sit and look at thousands of pieces of work and differentiate what goes together, what doesn't go together, what needs to be here, what needs to be there, and just do it. And
yeah.
then we could stop and put that to the side and like go make our own stuff.
Yeah.
And then come back and be like, okay, so I think this will go good here with this person, with this institution because they believe in this and this artist is doing this, and let me put these two people together
Right.
and then let me help that. And that's really what it is.
Yeah.
Um, and it is like I'm grateful that I can turn it on and turn it off. But
Right.
I really believe that it has to do because I started teaching really, really young and looking at all that work or having like stronger critiques in undergrad, because once you learn how to critique and understand how to take critique and embrace what those conversations are, you can start to look at things more critically and make decisions.
Yeah. And I think, it's interesting because in I've seen in so many different instances where when some artists step into curating, they may completely drop the artist and like don't ever make art again,
Yeah,
and that is an interesting decision, right? And I understand it
yeah,
because as you kind of alluded to, it is a juggling act, right? Because you know an art opportunity is an art opportunity, whether it's a curatorial art opportunity
yep,
or artist opportunity. And so you still have to manage those things, right?
yep.
And then, for some people, they're like, like I'm not going to be juggling these two types of opportunities
Yeah,
to
it's
just
hard.
to solely do the art side of it, or you know what, I'm gonna just stick with the curating part, and I'm just gonna only do that. And so I think that's definitely, as I've talked to other curators that have been artists and don't consider themselves artists anymore, it's interesting to kind of hear their perspective of like, yeah, I just kind of like to say, I'm not gonna do that anymore. Um, and then like, versus those who are like, no, I'm gonna keep maintaining my practice. Like, I'm not gonna stop being an artist just because I also believe in supporting other artists.
Hmm.
And I think for me, it's definitely challenging, and I can
Yeah.
see for yourself as you're talking about. I'm like, yep, you're like, competing interests, can kind of come in, and you're like, okay, how do I want to handle this?
Yep, it
But
is a
if you're
juggling act.
committed to your practice, then that's just it is what it is. It's just a part of it.
Yeah, I think to the extent that curating becomes, and we've been talking about this a lot because at Hockaday, I teach at Hockaday, but at Hockaday, they have this program where um, it is basically social practice, but they're not calling it social practice. And SMU has a social practice class, and one of my best friends is teaching it. So we are having this conversation a lot about art as social practice. And I'm starting to think that curating is social practice, um, and putting these people together. But like, and I'm saying that in the way that I curate.
Right.
So when
Right.
Vibrant Thing happened, I had a list of people and I reached out to the list. And once I informed the list of people that they were, going to be in a show together, I put them in a group chat together on Instagram. And then that group chat turned into like, okay, let's have an event that looks like this. And it was a cookout, obviously, but it turned into a cookout. And then that group of people stayed in the group chat and now are friends. Then I had a chance to jury a show at 500X for Black Voices. And then that group became a part of Vibrant Group and it became a whole new thing. So I built on top of this community and I was like, I'm giving time for each and every one of these people to experience, how to meet people in the same game, how to have build relationships with them, and then like still take care of each other. And I'm like, is that social practice? Is this the method of social practice? Is this another part of my art journey? Is it just curating? Am I still
Mhm.
building ecosystems and spaces? And now thinking about, talking to Jerlisa, who's teaching social practices at SMU, and talking to some of the faculty at Hockaday, I think I'm convinced that like that's how it happens on the back end for us,
Mhm.
to build that ecosystem, and that is a stronger sense of curatorial, vibes than just being like I'm a curator and I put these artists together in a show. I was like, no, I'm a curator and put these artists together in life and give
Yeah.
them that space. Yeah.
Right. I definitely identify with that. And I don't think that it was automatically clear to me necessarily, when I started to do it, even having my own space
Hmm.
to do that, I didn't necessarily say, oh, I'm a social practice artist doing
Yeah.
this. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I think, you know, in some ways, like, I'm not saying there's a greater or lesser of like what social practice can look like, but I feel like there's like doing the work and you're just doing it because it needs to be done. And then
Hmm.
there's like, I'm doing a thing, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I've learned in looking back, like, oh, that's what I was doing. I didn't really realize that. So I love how
Yeah.
you mentioned that. And there's been other artists that do identify as social practice artists that, we all kind of do similar things. And they're like,
Yeah.
no, this is social practice to me. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I never would have like thought of it in that way.
Hmm.
But I think that there is definitely, especially if you're continuing to be an artist, I think there's a way
Yep.
to think about how we engage communities. Like, I know that I'm a very community centered artist. So
Hmm.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I think once, like, the last couple of weeks that I've been thinking about where social practice exists, and then having like you or Vivian Crockett remind me that, like, no, you put these group of people together, like you built a foundation, like, slowly, but you built a foundation. That is the thing of social practice. Like, you did that
Mhm.
work.
Yeah.
Um, Even if it doesn't seem like it's working all the time, it's still something that's a foundation. So I think almost now I kind of like don't want to use curator, and I
Hmm.
still just want to use artist and then add social practice on,
Yeah.
or I don't know, it might change. Who knows?
Yeah. And
Yeah,
what I love about labels is that it's what you want it to be. You know what I mean?
mhm,
It's what you call it, right? It's
yep,
like, what's the difference between an artist and someone who isn't? It's whether you
yep,
say you are, right? So
yep,
I mean, that's the biggest part of it. It's like, are you an artist? Yeah. Okay, well
yeah,
then there you go.
yep.
uh,
So I think that's a real. We can stay in that realm.
yeah, yeah, yeah. um, so um where do you see your with that mind of like, where do you see yourself? Where do you see yourself in this wider like field of the art world?
Um, I don't know why I am so in love with teaching and education. Well, I know why. My mom's an educator. My grandmother was. School was very, heavily pushed in my household, but it was always around whatever you wanted to enjoy. So um, I think I still love that thought process of, like, you go to school to know, like, learn things you didn't know before, but also to, like, challenge, challenge the system, first of all,
Hmm.
but also, like, challenge, your friends. And, like, if you didn't go to that one art class that made you think about community, you wouldn't question how things are running in your community. You wouldn't have that
Hmm.
dialogue. So school has always been a thing for me, around dialogue and questioning and advancing thought process. So I love being an educator, but I also love providing that safe space for that to happen. Um, so I think moving forward, it will always be me building that space so that can happen. So if that looks like me having a center or a community art space, I don't know, or community studios, like, or even like building a residency, I want that space to happen. But I also want to give that opportunity for them to, like, meet with different artists, meet with different curators, have actual studio visits and critiques, and continue that conversation in education. Like, talk about theory, because a lot of artists who don't go to school don't get that theory portion as much. They have to do the research on their own, and sometimes it's really, really hard, especially when you don't have access to like JSTOR or Art Store where you can get those information, that information. But yeah, like building something around those lines and letting that prosper, because it's just providing that space where all those things can continue.
And it's an opportunity to pay it forward and give back
Yep.
what, all that knowledge and all that you've have learned,
Yeah.
and kind of like pour that into other people, support other people to do the
Yeah.
same thing that you're doing.
Yeah. I'm so sorry they're cutting the grass, and it's just like, wow, I thought you cut the grass yesterday. Nope, it's today.
Yeah, this is like clearly like a time of day where like people
Everything
are like
happens.
coming doing work in neighborhoods because like they're doing the same in mine. so
Uh,
so if for those who are just tuning in now, you are watching the art edition of the Den Black Film Festival Institute presents Soul Talk, and we're talking with Ciara Elle Bryant today. So just to continue what we were just talking about and kind of to expound on what you were just saying,
mhm,
what are you talked about theory?
mhm.
So, and this is something that's I feel this is huge to me, obviously, because I'm like, a big theory, critical theory person. Um, what is what theories or theory are you informed by in your work, and why is it so important to be informed by a theory or theories? So I feel like that's always something
Yeah.
that people may miss about the opportunity that going to school does provide.
Mhm.
Because I get asked this all the time. Well, what's the advantage of going to
Let's
school?
go to school. Yeah.
Because I could just show without going to school or whatever.
Yes, you can. You definitely
You
can.
can. But so in your mind, based on what you've been able to accomplish and the things that you're informed by, like how did those theories help you?
Yeah, I think when I was an undergrad, because that was the first time I had to do a thesis and write about my work in context with others, and it basically came from, which now that I think about it, it's still the same, is media and understanding reading of media and viewing of media. So in undergrad, I wrote my thesis on being the black female body being invisible. And I used, context from TV shows and Beyonce, obviously, and, put that in the framework of like Lorna Simpson and Kara Walker, and how my work was in conversation with those two artists at that time. Um, Now I'm constantly taking in images because of server. So it's still media and it's still reading media critically, but it's now talking about where culture exists,
Mhm.
and Black culture being documented and not documented per se, or
Mhm.
who's documenting Black culture or the Black experience. To figure out that like some of the most influential art books on African or African American art are written by white males really kind of like mess me up. But then to be like a really heavy photo person that has a heavy photo background and understanding like Deborah Willis literally catapulted the theory of imagery,
Mhm.
and Black imagery over the last 20, 30 years
Yes.
was really important, because I reference Deborah Willis all the time, but I also reference Bell's Bell Hooks' thoughts on imagery and the importance of photography a lot.
Mhm.
So I spend a lot of time in reading media critically, but also the theories that happen around iconography and some. This is really loud. I cannot focus. Iconography and tropes. So and we talk a lot about tropes when we get to films and filmmaking. So I spent a lot of time there, and that kind of puts me back into that film world and viewing imagery a lot,
Mm.
because I research for me is sitting here on Netflix watching 15 shows a month, or spending time on TikToks and taking in all this information, or
Right.
going on YouTube dives, which are really, really hard to do now because I'm so busy. But like that informs my work, and I'm looking
Mm.
at these things and putting in context of history. So it's a lot, but that's how my trajectory has gone with doing research.
Yeah.
Also, understanding that certain articles about culture, or certain articles, news articles that have nothing to do with art,
Mm.
um, inform how I look at dialogue and how the body is being treated, or how culture is being treated.
So yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I all that, the whole researching while you're watching movies, and so it's always so funny because we're both educators, how like you're researching while you're watching everything, or you're looking
Yeah.
at everything, and then those that's kind of like where you get ideas about like,
Mhm.
sharing things with students. You're like, oh yes, I need to share this with my student, or a topic or whatever.
Yeah, I remember it was wild because like last year when Lovecraft Country was on, and to know that some of the references were from photographs, and to know that some of the references were from books I've read, and then to listen to a whole podcast, and the podcast gave me more like information that I had already known, but it like put it in the context with like this work. It was just like I take in so much all the time that's research based to like inform everything else, that it's just like it makes sense that I listen to podcasts, 3 hours out of the day, and then still watch TV, and still get on TikTok, and still look at Instagram, because I'm looking for those imagery. I'm looking for that imagery, but I'm also using audio and
Mm.
words to connect everything.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a hard but long, tedious process.
So like, what would you say, like, if you were trying to if you're trying to encourage someone else that
Mhm.
to see the value of all of these things, you know, why why engage with
Why?
all of that multi-layered information? What does that do for the work
I
ultimately?
think it makes the work better no matter what. It makes the work better. If I can honestly tell, looking at somebody's work, new or practicing artist for however long, and understand if they are making from a place that is informed or not informed. Most of the time, if it's informed with all these other things and theories, there are little nuggets that happen in the treatment of the work, especially with painters. You'll see things that like reference viewing today, because painting is a little bit looser, and you can, you
Mhm.
know, do a lot of things and add layers in that way. But when people like do sculpture, I can see if it's informed by, historical sculpture, historical African sculpture, or if they're talking about objects and iconography in a certain way. So it kind of, when you have that, it informs everything you do. When you don't, it's kind of flat. And then you have to ask the question, like, what is this? Where is this going? Why is it going there? And those leading questions then help said artists kind of go into some other things.
Mhm.
But if it's there in the beginning, the conversation is not going to be what and why. It's going to be like, I understand. Tell me more.
Right. So
So,
I almost hear you saying like it strengthens the conversation and
hmm
really kind of builds a conversation, period.
hmm yep.
Um, and kind of similar to like what you're saying, you can always tell when someone actually has a conversation behind their work, and when
Yep.
there is no conversation, it's just more about the making.
Yeah.
the work. And that's a thing too, so that's
No,
fine.
it is a thing. I learned that in grad school actually, because around in grad school, a lot of the professors who are there and were around the how. Like,
Hmm.
how did you make this? Why did you use this? Why did you not use this? Instead of being like, oh, this is what's informing this piece. This is what
Right.
I understand of this piece. And it depends on the audience. Sometimes the audience of how
Yeah.
is the most impactful, most powerful, the most, advanced. And then in the sense of where the art institution is versus the people that are questioning the how,
Hmm.
the why, and the information. So
Do you feel like as a Black artist, there's a little bit more expected out of us
yeah,
to have a
yes,
conversation?
not to have the conversation. I think it is expected that the work is good, and I'm gonna say this because I've been thinking about this a lot. So it's more expected that the work is good and palatable and easy to read,
Mm,
not necessarily more informed.
okay.
And I say this because of current experiences with my work and some of my peers' work. But if it is something that is nice and neatly packaged, it will get a different type of praise and conversation versus something that is super informative and built on theory and built on um, references and foundation work of other artists.
Mm,
Um, I will say here in Dallas, it is, oh, we like the pretty thing. We can understand it. We could put a package on it. We can also sell it versus, people that are doing huge installation work
yeah.
or huge sculptures or video work that is different.
Yeah.
Um, it's not easily marketable, palatable, understandable, because then you have to have those hard conversations of like, why is this here? Why haven't I seen it before? And am
Hmm.
I negating that person's experience because I don't want to know all the hard things about it?
Yeah.
So
And it's
that's what I think.
it's kind of like the conversation about that I think we have within the art world, like overall, about like just the hierarchies of like the type of artworks
Hmm.
that you make. And there's still, even though like installation is more widely acceptable in some respects, from a market perspective,
It is not.
market is still very much drawn to the more traditional
Mhm.
notion of what art is, which
Yes.
is like, more paintings, and it's not just any painting now, by the way. It's not like like you said, it's a certain type of painting. And then from us, it's
Yep.
always a certain type of painting.
Yep.
Um, so it's not like you can just kind of be all willy nilly out here painting anything. Like there is to it feels like there is an expectation that we need to be painting something very specific too.
Yep. Hmm. Hmm.
So how do you handle that?
Um, I don't. No, I'm just kidding. I do handle it, but I think
And there's no
hmm,
it's not like you have to handle it, but
I don't have to handle it, but I do get frustrated a lot
mm-hmm.
because I don't make. So let me rephrase. I do make pretty things. I still do
Yes,
make
you do.
photographs.
Actually, you do.
I do. And I do make an element that can be sold and brought. However, I don't do it often. So, like when I do
Mm,
photographs, they exist in the installation. There's very few times where I sell the photograph that's in the installation. I did last year and it did not feel right or genuine. So I thought about that again, and I like always grapple with the like I don't make things that are sellable or not somebody like a regular collector can just pick up and buy. It
Mm-hmm.
is I'm making things that, deserve to be, put in institutions or bigger spaces to live and
For
have
a
the
longer time.
longevity. Yeah. And it's not just a print that I can hang on the wall and give to my grandkids. It's not that. And I think I get mad sometimes at myself for not doing that.
Right.
Because I'm just like,
Yes.
why am I making this huge work that costs me all this money and it's only up and then it's in storage and that? And then I'm like, because you want to, because it's a bigger process than that. Um, I don't necessarily engage with, the whole make it pretty, make it nice, make it purchasable. It's more of make it impactful, make it be the thing that you want somebody to talk about when they go see another work somewhere else. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting ready for the show next month, and checks on the blocker is still coming up, server is still coming up in this way of like, okay, if this is happening, then where is this going now, and like, what is the reference? And now I'm looking at media artists that I wasn't looking at before, but when I think about space and tech, because now I'm getting into the tech world, it's starting to inform different things and different ways of that. And sometimes that's not pretty and packageable. It is messy and cords and way more money and having to put more time and require more people and more help.
Mm,
Uh, so I don't think I ever want to go back to that. Here's a photograph framed pretty on the wall, and you can buy it. And I don't even print photographs like that. So if I did print it, it would be a one of one anyway. So it'll be
right.
like $10,000 just for this one photograph that I'll never print again. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
it's not that pretty aesthetic over here.
And it's interesting how because I feel like there's a lot of, which is why I probably feel like I'm sharing a little bit more of myself with you, because I feel like there's so many overlaps, and
Mhm.
that we both do installation. um I do feel like over the years I've done more two-dimensional installations more than what I when I started doing installations that I probably didn't think I would do.
Yeah.
um and those have been some of the ones that have had that component that you're talking about, of like, it's pretty, it's marketable, and I wasn't thinking of it that way. It's just, that's just what I wanted to make.
Yeah.
um but that was a evolution of of like, I get, you know what, I think I'm gonna do some prints, like, of all
Uh-huh.
things,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
but time will tell. But I could definitely, I feel like there's so many platforms for an artist like yourself that does installations, that does media, that, so like, what's marketable is so like subjective, right? There's
Yeah.
like
I should
the
say
sale of work.
marketable in Dallas. Mm.
Okay. Okay.
Marketable in Dallas.
I understand what you're saying. But also I think like there's the there's the different ways of being marketable. There aren't just the selling of work, but this, like, that you actually offer
Hmm.
something that is an experience, right? So like, there are more experiential opportunities, you know what I mean, that you can contract, you know,
Yeah.
and do things in that way. I could totally, well, you're already doing that, so you may be like,
Yeah,
what's
I
side
got
of
I got
that?
kind of into that world really quickly, which I'm very thankful for because, like, having the chance to do the National Windows,
Hmm.
that gave me that trajectory to get into like these other realms of like showing work in a different way, and then working with Aurora, you and Aurora, um, that gave me a whole different way for people to experience my work, a different audience. But then like
Mm-hmm.
also it's like, okay, it's bigger, it's better, it has this component and not this component. It's
Right.
not just, it's still imagery, but it's not my normal server imagery.
Right.
Um, so it kind of like catapulted me into that. I do want to like not be that artist that just does like experiences and things and just shows and
Not limiting
very,
yourself to that.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
don't want to be down to that. I just want to be able to like make and have a place to install that is huge and it be a thing and it still, be, up to my standards of like how I want, my fine art to be viewed.
So tell the audience, we haven't talked as much about specific pieces.
Hmm.
Um, I want the audience to know about Server because I think it is an amazing ongoing project.
Yeah.
And so I want them to hear more from you about Server and then just how you're continuing to evolve with the Server project.
Okay. Server is my baby. Okay, so Server happened during grad school at the first time because I was supposed to have this show. We were supposed to have our thesis show and to defend our thesis. We opted out as a group to do a different show that wasn't on campus so we could have space.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided that I was going to cover a whole room of a house in my bibliography.
Mm-hmm.
And because everybody at the time at my institution was saying, oh, we don't understand, we don't know what this thing is, we don't get why you're referencing this or why, even though I had given them like a Google Drive folder with videos I was watching on YouTube, music videos, list of shows that like I kept bringing up in my work in context, list of artists that I kept bringing up, and like talking about Tumblr and Instagram and imagery, and like I had given it to them, and they
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't go look at it. So me being
Interesting.
the the asshole I am was like, oh, you're not gonna look at it? I'm gonna make you look at it. So I talked with my committee chair, who was Melanie Clemens at the time, and I was like, hey, that folder that has like all my links and stuff in it, and my Tumblr, I'm gonna put that all over the walls and like cover the wall with this information.
Mm.
So she was like, okay. And then like nobody knew what I was doing. It just happened. I did it within 2 weeks, which I don't recommend doing a server in 2 weeks ever, but I've done it 3 times already and it's hard. But I covered from floor to ceiling, this room full of imagery that had to do with Black culture in that specific bibliography of work. So it had an audio component that was songs that I sent to a DJ friend at the time, and she made a playlist, and they were burnt on burned CDs. And then I had a video component that had the scroll of me going through my Tumblr and all the
Mm.
imagery I had saved. And then I had my photographs that I had taken of me, as well as the safe place, I call it, which is Big T at the time. Big T was where I would go when I needed to like calm down because school was getting too rough.
Mm.
So I would go to Big T and spend time there and get my hair braided and feel love and like feel genuine. And then the space was filled with objects that resonated with me and my childhood. So there are photographs that I've taken since I was a kid that were on the wall. There are magazine cutouts of like me. I used to do this thing where I used to cut out things out of magazines and just like save them. I have binders full of like these little things.
Oh,
So I
Sierra,
did that
we
again.
two alike.
I did that again, and I like put it in the space, and I was like, okay, if they tell me they don't understand it now, like
Mm.
I don't know what to do. That means they're definitely not trying.
Yeah.
And I built that thing in that space, and it was for me.
Mm.
Um, and it was for me to experience it out, but then also like I had a lot of Black women come in there, Black men come in there and feel like, oh my God, I understand what this is.
Yeah.
So that's where the first part of server started, but like a component of that has kept evolving, whether
Mm-hmm.
it be the imagery or the objects.
Mm-hmm.
So the next time I did server was for the Nasher, and it was the imagery was very similar, but it was talking about the uprising and us being in quarantine and being, you know, like harshly affected by the pandemic as a Black people. So that
Mm.
was talked about. And then the audio component, which I spent, you know, 5 days on, had a lot to do with, you know, hearing the audio from the 911 call for Breonna Taylor, having to hear Trayvon Martin's dad testify during the
Mm.
hearing, and like having all these things that like have impacted us socially because we had the access to it, and some of this I'm glad we have it, but at the same time it's detrimental to us.
Yeah.
I put that all together and I showed that
Yeah.
in a space during a time that was very aggressive and hard.
Yeah.
Um, and that evolved into, you know, it be one that just had to deal with the identity of beauty and where Black women stem their beauty from. And it starts with hair, and it
Mm-hmm.
evolves into now being server checks on the block that went back to the original server where I reference there's a portrait of Nike boxes in the
Mm-hmm.
original server, and I referenced that stack of boxes for server checks on the block, and I had a pair of Jordan threes in the first server, and then I had the stack of Nike boxes. So that kind of like evolved into what server checks on the block
Right.
became. So the reference was always intentional and always there.
Yeah. It's kind of like the extensions are like, if you were to pull a chapter out of like server, like if you look at it as like this is like the full database, and you
Mm-hmm.
pull like, okay, there's this chapter,
Yep.
and there's that aspect, and then here's
Yep.
another chapter. There you go.
Yep.
And which I love that because it's like a repository on Black culture.
Mm-hmm.
um but what I enjoyed especially about Chicks on the Block was I feel like there is a whole culture around, sneaker culture that
Uh-huh.
I feel like is misunderstood. It is like it is a generational thing, you
Yeah.
know, that like I don't know that all Black people understand, you know?
No, but I think the reference is how so Sunday's best is where
Mm.
the reference is starting to come from. Like we
Yeah.
understand that we put on our best to go out to be this thing, and that is the equivalent to a brand new pair of white Air Force Ones, fresh out the box, FOBs, or any pair of brand new shoes. It's that fresh out the box thing. I spent my hard-earned money and
Mm.
time to get this thing because this is my best. It's that reference.
Yeah.
It just came down to sneakers because it is a billion-dollar industry that
Yeah.
was built on the backs of Black people. That we don't talk about streetwear as in this is the thing that Black people did to stand out and feel good about themselves. It turns into that, oh, streetwear is this, and this is what all these artists or celebrities or
It's
other
urban.
cultures are taking this urban thing and doing, when it literally has been the way we've dressed and expressed ourselves since the dawn of time, from the 30s to now. Um, and understanding like that is us showing off.
Yeah.
Um, and I chose, the Air Force One because it's like something that is still in a price point that is affordable. Um,
Yeah.
it's less than $100, so anybody can, you know, get this one shoe. It is a commodity right now because it is making a comeback. I would know. I just bought a bunch of them, but it's making a comeback, and it's like to the point where like some people were like buying boxes and cases of them and like reselling them. And it was like, this is this thing that is a staple. It's like
Yeah.
white rice. It's something you always have. And now it's
Mhm.
being like harder to get. So
So
I
it's more
wanted to
valuable.
I wanted to talk about that, but it's like the Sunday's best. I always think about that when I think about, my Air Force Ones, and then like I can dress it up, I can dress it down. It is
Mhm.
something to show that I'm taking care of
Yes.
myself and I'm putting myself forward.
It's interesting. I've been working. I've been working on an ongoing project called "A Call to Black Women," and
Hmm.
it is looking at the scholarship and activism of Nanny Helen Burroughs.
Hmm.
Mm, She's sort of like the center piece of that whole Sunday best and looking your best. Um, the Bible, and the broom. Like you take
Hmm.
care of your house, you
House.
take care of your body, and then of course,
Yep.
your not necessarily religion, but like, you know, your own spirituality.
Yes.
Um, and one of the things that, often is talked about a lot in our culture now is like respectability politics.
Hmm.
But there's a scholar named Evelyn Higginbottom that Botham, sorry. She wrote a book that kind of highlighted Nanny Helen Burroughs, and she talks about a politics of respectability. And it's not so much that it's about the respectability aspect, but I think
Hmm.
it's the politics of resistance behind
Yes.
how we present ourselves, and that there is such a politics. Like, kind
Yeah.
of to your point about like, you can flip that politics in so many ways.
Hmm.
Sunday best, Air Force Ones,
Yeah.
it's like however you want to do it, it is like we're all making it a choice
Hmm.
to like, this is my best,
Yeah.
and that as
I
an act of
think
resistance.
I think like, especially for me, I just had an experience at work. It was weird, but then also like I had to do meet the parents because I am at a high school. I had to do the thing, and in my head, I was like, okay, I'm wearing this dress, but with my fancy Air Force Ones, and it was just like
Mm,
this moment of like, oh my God, I'm actively doing this thing in my life, and I have been doing these things, but like it is the respectability politics, and it is I want to look my best and wear this dress that is very beautiful, colorful. It screams I'm an art teacher, but then also I want to be true to myself, and myself is wearing the Air Force Ones, but the yellow Air Force Ones that match the dress because I have
right.
yellow in the dress, and it says
Yeah.
I'm an art teacher. So
Yeah.
it was this moment, but then I also think about how in relationship to slavery and being owned, that we had this one thing and we had to take care of
Yeah.
this one thing, and this one thing had to last us for to whenever extent because massa gave it to us, and we put a lot of care and emphasis in that. So that turned into how I care about my shoes, or I care about my jewelry, or I care about my Brandon Blackwood bag, or my Telfar, and how much I put emphasis in those things that carry my culture, but also as a reference to that part of my ancestry. So
Yeah. Just the fact that we had to fight for everything, right? And
yeah,
as a result of
and
that, the things that we care about, whether it's objects, I mean, in objects in particular,
hmm,
there's a sense of like um reverence, and appreciation,
yep,
for those objects. Like my grandmother used to sign, like anything was hers, she signed it.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And I always thought like, that's like there's something to that. It's like that's mine.
Ownership is mine. It's mine. Yeah, that
And
ownership.
like it's just that sense of like, if you live in a world where you didn't have control over what's yours.
Hmm.
You know what I
And
mean?
and that's the thing. Like even now, we have some control,
Yeah.
not all control of what is ours and how we exist, or things. And I talk about systemic racism all the time. And this is that one part that is mine and I can hold on to. And it is, streetwear, fashion, objecthood that is happening. Even though it's feeding into capitalism, it still is my part of my identity.
Yes. I love it. I love it. Well, Ciara, how would our viewing audience get to follow you or like check in on you on your various social media platforms? How do they find you?
So all my handles are the same thing. So it's Ciara Elle Bryant. So it's my Instagram, my Vimeo, where I post some of the short films I've made or working on. My Tumblr is also Ciara Elle Bryant. My Twitter is Ciara Elle Bryant. My TikTok, however, is not, and I need to change it. So I will do that. And my website is also Ciara Elle Bryant. So you can find me on the interwebs.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ciara, for joining us today and for sharing your story, for sharing your art with us. It's always just such a pleasure to catch up with you and to see what you're working on. And I know that you have many amazing things brewing and
Yes.
upcoming that we'll hear about.
Yes.
So, but thank you so much for joining us today. And
Thank
thank
you.
you, guests who joined in with us today. We hope that you enjoyed the show and learning more about Ciara. Feel free to follow her,
Yeah.
subscribe on her
I
social
answer my
media.
DMs, so you can send me messages. I do respond.
And thank you to our sponsor, NBC5 DFW, for continuing to support this show. And be sure to follow Denton Black Film Festival on social media at Denton BFF, or visit the website to stay up to date on upcoming events. Um, Also, just a reminder that film submissions are open as well. Um, Screen dance submissions and the original music video competition, and the deadline is in October. Thanks for watching, everyone, and here is a peek of what you can expect at the upcoming festival. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ciara.
Thanks.